It starts before you even notice it. Not with noise, not with an explosion. It starts with a quiet that settles into the room like dust, slow and unavoidable. You sit there, and the world keeps moving without you, but inside your chest, everything feels frozen. The phone stays dark, the door stays closed, the messages don't come, and that's when the truth shows its face. You were never surrounded the way you thought you were. You were only tolerated when you were useful, entertaining, easy to be around. But the moment you became heavy, the moment your life required patience, the moment you needed loyalty instead of laughter, the room emptied. People always leave when you stop being convenient. That doesn't make you cursed, it makes you awake. This is the part nobody tells you, the part they hide behind "you'll be fine" and "time heals." Time doesn't heal a man who keeps bleeding in silence. Time just passes, and while it passes, it tests you. It tests whether you will collapse into the emptiness or whether you will use it like a furnace. Because loneliness is not just a feeling. Loneliness is a mirror. It doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care about your story. It shows you exactly what you are when nobody's watching and nothing is cheering for you. It shows you whether you have a spine or just a need for approval dressed up like confidence. You think you miss people. Sometimes you don't miss them. You miss the version of yourself you were when you believed they would stay. You miss the illusion. You miss the comfort of thinking you weren't alone in this fight. But now the illusion is gone, and what's left is the raw reality you kept avoiding. You are the only one who will carry you through the nights when your chest feels too tight and your thoughts feel too loud. You are the only one who will drag you out of bed when your body wants to stay buried. You are the only one who will hold the line when your mind starts bargaining for relief. That's the beginning of strength, not the kind people clap for, the kind that forms when nobody's there to witness it. And listen closely, because this is where most men fail. They treat loneliness like a punishment. They treat solitude like a sentence. They turn it into bitterness, into anger, into resentment that eats them alive from the inside. They start asking why they were left, why they were replaced, why they weren't chosen. But that question is poison. It keeps you trapped in the past, like a man begging for a different ending to a chapter that already closed. The question that matters is not why they left. The question is what you're going to build in the space they left behind. Because space is power, silence is power, and when you stop filling it with desperate noise, you start hearing the truth. The truth is that you can stand on your own. The truth is that you can become dangerous without anyone beside you. The truth is that being alone is not the end of you. It is the beginning of the version of you that doesn't need permission to rise. Now that you're here, now that the room is quiet and the world isn't looking, you have two choices. You can keep mourning what disappeared, or you can use the emptiness like a training ground. You can use it to learn the one skill that separates the men who break from the men who endure. Self-reliance. The ability to carry your own mind, the ability to sit with pain without escaping into distractions, the ability to feel the ache and still do what needs to be done. That's what makes a man unstoppable. Not popularity, not love, not attention, the ability to move even when nobody cares. And you might not believe this yet, but the day you stop expecting someone to come back and fix the emptiness is the day the emptiness stops controlling you. The day you stop waiting is the day you start. The day you accept that you are alone is the day you stop fearing it. Because a man who accepts solitude becomes immune to abandonment. He can't be threatened with absence anymore. He can't be controlled by withdrawal. He can't be manipulated by the fear of being left, because he already knows how to stand in the dark and breathe. That's where power begins, quietly, in the dark, without applause, without witnesses. And it starts right now. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't show itself the way movies show pain. It sits in your ribs like a heavy stone. It follows you into the shower. It sits beside you when you eat. It waits for you at night when the distractions run out. You can be surrounded by people and still feel it. You can laugh and still feel it. You can act normal and still feel it. Because this pain isn't about the outside world. It's about what you carry inside. It's the pain of being unseen, the pain of being replaced, the pain of realizing you gave more than you should have and still ended up alone. It's the pain of checking your phone and knowing deep down nothing is coming, but still checking anyway, because some part of you is addicted to hope. Not real hope, the kind that builds, the lazy hope. The hope that someone will suddenly remember you, suddenly care, suddenly return and make the emptiness disappear. That's the hope that keeps men weak, because it teaches you to wait instead of move. And every day you wait, the pain doesn't shrink, it settles deeper. It becomes normal, it becomes your background noise. And that's when it becomes dangerous. Because the worst thing that can happen to a man isn't pain, it's getting used to pain. It's accepting a life that hurts just enough to drain you, but not enough to force you to change. Some nights you sit there and you replay everything, not because you want to, because your mind won't let you stop. You replay the words, the smiles, the promises, the I'm here, the I won't leave, the way they looked at you when you thought you mattered, and then your chest tightens because you realize how quickly it all turned into silence. That's what hurts. Not just that they left, but that they left so easily, that they didn't fight, that they didn't hesitate, that they didn't look back. And you start questioning yourself, searching your own life for a reason, like maybe if you find the flaw, you can undo the damage. But you can't undo it. You can only decide what it becomes. Because pain has a purpose, even when it feels unfair. Pain removes illusions. Pain strips away the fantasy that people will always choose you. Pain forces you to face the brutal fact that the only loyalty you can control is your own. And if you've been honest, you haven't been loyal to yourself. You've abandoned yourself in small ways every day. You've lowered your standards to match your mood. You've betrayed your own goals to chase comfort. You've traded your future for temporary relief and then wondered why you feel empty. That emptiness isn't random. It's the price of not respecting yourself. The loneliness you feel is not only about others leaving, it's also about you leaving yourself. Every time you said you would change and didn't. Every time you said you would work and you scrolled instead. Every time you promised yourself discipline and chose distraction. Those choices stack up and become a quiet disappointment that sits inside you like grief. You feel it when you wake up. You feel it when you look in the mirror. You feel it when you see someone else moving forward while you stay still. That's not jealousy. That's your conscience. That's the part of you that still remembers who you could be. And the pain will keep speaking until you listen. It will keep pressing on your chest until you stop trying to escape and start trying to build. That's why this moment matters, because right now you are still breathing, you are still standing, you are still capable, and that means you still have a choice. You can let this pain turn you into a man who becomes bitter and small, a man who needs the world to be gentle before he acts, or you can let it turn you into something harder to break, something steady, something disciplined, something that doesn't need permission to rise. At some point, the mind stops pretending. It gets tired of the excuses, tired of the stories you tell yourself to keep the pain soft, and it whispers the sentence you've been avoiding because it changes everything. Nobody is coming, not for you, not to rescue you, not to drag you out of this, not to carry what you keep dropping. You can sit there and wait. You can stare at the ceiling until morning. You can hope that someone finally understands how heavy it feels. But the world keeps moving. Bills still exist. Time still advances. People still chase their own lives. And the brutal truth is that your suffering is not loud enough to interrupt anyone else's priorities. Even the ones who love you have limits. Even the ones who care can't live inside your head. They'll give you sympathy until it becomes inconvenient, and then they'll return to their own problems. That isn't cruelty. That's reality. Nobody is coming doesn't mean you're worthless. It means you've been handing your power away and calling it hope. It means you've been waiting for permission to become the man you keep saying you want to be. You've been waiting for the perfect mood, the perfect timing, the perfect energy. Like discipline is something that falls from the sky when life finally becomes fair. But life doesn't become fair, it becomes final. And the reason this sentence hurts is because it removes your exits. It removes the fantasy that someone will lift you without you moving. It forces you to accept that if you don't save yourself, you will drown quietly, and nothing in the universe will stop it. So hear me clearly. Nobody is coming is the most painful gift a man can receive. Because the moment you accept it, you stop begging. You stop waiting. You stop living like your life is a temporary problem that will fix itself. You start living like a man who understands the cost of delay. You start building structure instead of chasing feelings. You start doing the work even when you're empty, because you finally understand that empty days are not exceptions. They are the majority, and the majority is what shapes you. The days you feel fired up are rare. The days you feel average, tired, heavy, indifferent, those are the days that decide your identity. Those are the days where either you practice weakness or you practice strength. And don't confuse this with becoming cold in a childish way. This isn't about acting like you don't need anyone. This is about becoming the kind of man who can carry himself even when he has no one. The kind of man who doesn't collapse the moment he feels unseen. Because once you become that, you become untouchable. You can't be controlled by abandonment anymore. You can't be manipulated by silence. You can't be threatened with distance. You've already survived it. You've already learned how to breathe when the room went quiet. And when the world realizes you don't need it to stand, something changes. People start respecting you without you asking, not because you demanded it, but because your actions proved it. That's how the world works. It responds to strength, not speeches. Now you might be thinking this is unfair, that you shouldn't have to carry all this alone, that someone should have stayed, someone should have fought for you, someone should have seen the struggle behind your eyes. And maybe you're right. Maybe you deserved more. But the world doesn't pay men based on what they deserved. It pays them based on what they built, what they defended, what they endured. So if you want a different life, you won't get it by complaining about the lack of rescue. You'll get it by becoming your own rescue, over and over again, until that becomes your default. And the reason this hits so deep is because you remember. You remember the days when you weren't alone. You remember the laughter that made you feel safe. You remember the warmth that made the future feel lighter. You remember the words, the promises, the "I'm not going anywhere," the "I've got you." You remember believing it, not just hearing it, believing it, because your heart wanted to. Your heart wanted to trust, wanted to relax, wanted to finally stop being guarded. So you let people in. You gave them access to the parts of you that you normally keep hidden. You showed them the soft parts, the loyal parts, the parts that still believed in forever. And for a while, it felt real. It felt like home. Then came the shift. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was subtle. Replies got slower. Attention got colder. The energy changed. The warmth you relied on became distance. And you tried to pretend you didn't notice. You told yourself they were busy. You told yourself you were overthinking. You told yourself your loyalty would be enough to keep them close. That's what loyal men do. They keep giving because they think giving can fix what's breaking. They keep showing up even when the other person is fading because they think effort earns loyalty. But that's not how it works. Effort doesn't guarantee respect. Love doesn't guarantee staying. And loyalty given to the wrong people becomes self-destruction. You remember the moment you realized it. The moment you saw the truth in their eyes or in their silence. The moment you felt your stomach drop because you knew you were losing them and there was nothing you could do to stop it. That moment changes a man. Not because the person left, but because you realized how easily they could, how quickly they could detach, how quickly they could replace your presence with their peace. That's what burns. That's the betrayal memory. Not just what happened, but what it revealed. that your loyalty was deeper than theirs, that your heart was bigger than their capacity, that you were fighting for something they were already letting go of. And that memory follows you. It shows up when you try to trust again. It shows up when you hear someone make promises. It shows up when you feel yourself wanting to believe. It's like your mind holds a blade to your chest and says, "Remember what happened last time you opened up." That blade isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to teach you, to sharpen your discernment, to force you to stop giving your soul to people who only wanted your convenience. To remind you that not everyone deserves access to your loyalty, your time, your softness. Some people are only there for the easy version of you, and the moment your life becomes real, they disappear. So, let the memory hurt, but don't let it weaken you. Let it educate you. Let it strip away the naive part of you that believed every promise. Let it kill the version of you that thought love alone was enough. Because the man you're becoming doesn't need to beg for loyalty. He needs to embody standards. He needs to become the kind of man who chooses carefully, who trusts slowly, who respects himself enough to walk away the first time he feels himself being reduced. Betrayal doesn't have to make you bitter. It can make you precise. It can make you stronger. It can make you the kind of man who never again gives his power to someone who hasn't earned it. There's a special kind of silence that only exists between you and a screen. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind that feels like rest, the kind that feels like rejection dressed up as technology. You pick up your phone without thinking, not because you have something to do, but because your nervous system is searching for proof that you still matter. Your thumb refreshes the same apps like a ritual. One more check, one more look, one more chance that someone finally remembered you. And every time the screen stays empty, it doesn't just disappoint you, it humiliates you. Because the phone doesn't just show you silence, it shows you your place in other people's priorities. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself people are busy. You tell yourself you're being dramatic. But deep down you know what that silence means. It means you were present in their life until you became inconvenient. It means you were worth attention until attention required effort. It means you were valued when you were giving, laughing, entertaining, available. But the moment you went quiet, the moment you stopped carrying the conversation, the moment you stopped chasing, the world didn't run toward you. It kept walking. And that's when you realize the ugliest truth about modern connection. Most people don't miss you. They miss what you did for them. The phone becomes the battlefield of your patience. It becomes the test of your dignity. Because waiting for a message is not just waiting for words, it's waiting for validation, waiting for relief, waiting for a sign that your existence still reaches someone. And the longer you wait, the more your mind starts negotiating. Maybe I should text first. Maybe I should explain myself. Maybe I should fix it. Maybe if I send one more message, they'll remember. But that's how men lose themselves. One desperate attempt at comfort becomes a habit. One lowered standard becomes a pattern. And before you know it, you're a man who measures his worth by someone else's response time. And the worst part is that the phone turns you into a prisoner without bars. You can be physically free and still trapped by anticipation. You can be in a room full of people and still feel alone because you're watching a screen like it's a lifeline. You can be sitting at a table and still feel invisible because the person you want attention from is not speaking. And every time you refresh, every time you check, every time you hope, you teach your mind that your peace is dependent on another human being's decision. That is weakness disguised as love. That is dependence wearing a romantic mask. So, you start noticing the patterns, not just in them, in you. You start noticing how quickly your mood rises when you see a notification and how quickly it collapses when you don't. You start noticing how your heart races over something as small as a typing bubble, like you're starving and the smallest crumb feels like food. You start noticing how you live on the edge of expectation, like your life is paused until someone chooses to acknowledge you. That's not living, that's begging without words. And the phone's silence teaches you something if you're strong enough to learn it. It teaches you that you need to stop expecting people to fill the empty space inside you. Because if someone can control your emotions by choosing not to reply, they control you. If someone can keep you awake at night by staying silent, they own you. If someone can make you doubt your worth by removing their attention, they are holding your mind hostage, and you keep paying the ransom with your dignity. But then, something shifts. Not all at once. Slowly. It starts with exhaustion. You get tired of checking, tired of hoping, tired of chasing, tired of living in the shadow of someone else's decision. You start realizing you can't keep bleeding into the same empty space and calling it love. You start realizing that the silence you're afraid of is the same silence that could set you free. Because once you stop reaching, once you stop checking, once you stop waiting, your mind begins to return to you. Your attention comes back, your power comes back, your time comes back. And time is the only currency that matters. This is where pain becomes power, not because pain feels good, but because pain forces clarity. Pain forces you to see what you kept denying. Pain forces you to see what your heart was too loyal to admit. That you were investing in people who were not investing in you. That you were building a home in a place that didn't even want you to stay. That you were handing out your energy like it was unlimited, and now you're exhausted, empty, and disappointed. Pain is the receipt. Pain proves the transaction happened. Pain proves you gave more than you should have. And that's why it hurts. But pain is also the moment you finally stop lying. Pain is the moment you stop romanticizing the past and start respecting the present. Pain is the moment you stop needing closure and start needing change. Because closure is a fantasy. Most people never give closure. They give distance, they give silence, they give avoidance. They leave you with questions, and you can spend months trying to answer them, or you can accept the answer that matters. They chose to live without you. And the moment you accept that, you stop wasting your life trying to be chosen by someone who already decided. When pain becomes power, you stop being a man who waits. You become a man who builds. You redirect the energy you used to spend on anticipation into discipline, into training, into learning, into stacking proof that you can survive without the thing you thought you needed. You stop checking the phone because your goals become louder than your cravings. You stop replaying memories because your future becomes more important than your nostalgia. You stop begging for attention because you become too busy earning respect from yourself. And that's where the strength starts. Not in anger, not in revenge, in structure, in control, in consistency, in the ability to sit in silence and still move forward, in the ability to feel loneliness and still execute, in the ability to be unseen and still build. That is power. That is the kind of power nobody can take away because it doesn't come from others. It comes from you. It comes from the decision that you will no longer let absence define you. You will use it. You will turn it into fuel. You will let the silence sharpen you until you become the kind of man who doesn't need to be messaged to feel alive. You'll become the kind of man who makes the world curious again, not because you asked for attention, but because you disappeared into the work and came back different. Discipline begins when you stop begging your own mind for permission. Not permission from other people, because you already learned that people will leave, people will change, people will disappear the second life stops being convenient. The real permission you've been waiting for is internal. You've been waiting for your emotions to approve the work. You've been waiting for your mood to sign off on your goals. You've been waiting for your body to feel light, your thoughts to feel clear, your confidence to feel real. But the problem is that your emotions were never built to lead you. Emotions are weather. They come and they go, and they lie to you when you're tired. And if your life is built on weather, your life will collapse every time the season changes. Discipline begins when you accept that you will not feel ready most days. You will feel ordinary. You will feel heavy. You will feel distracted. You will feel numb. You will feel irritated. You will feel like the effort is pointless. And those are the days that matter most. Because those are the days where you stop building fantasies and start building identity. Anyone can talk about becoming a better man when they're emotional enough, angry enough, ashamed enough. Anyone can promise themselves a new life when they're disgusted with their own weakness. But what happens when the disgust fades? What happens when the pain becomes familiar? What happens when comfort starts whispering that you've earned a break, that you deserve relief, that you can start tomorrow? That is when discipline begins. When you're not panicking, when nobody is watching, when you could easily disappear into distraction and no one would punish you for it. When the consequences are far enough away to feel optional, that's when the real man either forms or dies quietly. It begins with small things because small things are honest. Big plans are easy because they are imaginary. Small commitments are hard because they reveal your character. It begins when you wake up and you don't negotiate with the alarm. It begins when you feel the urge to check your phone and you leave it face down. It begins when you tell yourself you will take a walk even though your chest feels tight and your mind is full of noise. It begins when you choose to eat like a man who respects his future instead of a man who eats to forget his pain. It begins when you keep your word in private, not because anyone will reward you, but because you are tired of being the kind of man who lies to himself and calls it a rough patch. The first days of discipline don't feel powerful. They feel humiliating, because discipline exposes how weak you've become. It exposes how easily your attention collapses, how quickly you crave comfort, how desperate you are for stimulation, how addicted you are to the feeling of escape. Discipline doesn't let you hide from that. Discipline forces you to see it and then carry it anyway. That's why most people quit. They mistake the discomfort of growth for proof they're not built for it. They feel resistance and assume it means they should stop, instead of understanding that resistance is simply the nervous system learning a new standard. And here is the part that matters. Discipline is not a one-time decision. It's a decision repeated so many times that it becomes your default. It becomes what you do without thinking. It becomes who you are. And that is how self-respect is rebuilt. You don't rebuild self-respect by telling yourself kind things in the mirror. You rebuild it by becoming reliable. You rebuild it by keeping promises you make to yourself. You rebuild it by finishing what you start. Because every time you quit, you don't just lose progress, you lose trust with yourself. Your mind remembers, your body remembers, your nervous system remembers. It collects evidence and it decides whether you are a man worth following. If you keep quitting, your deeper self stops listening to your motivational speeches because it has heard them before. It knows they are noise. Proof is the only language it respects, and proof is built through consistency. Discipline begins when you stop needing to feel good before you act, when you stop needing to feel confident, when you stop needing to feel inspired. You do the work first, then the feeling comes later. That's the order most men refuse to accept. They want confidence first because confidence feels safe. They want motivation first because motivation feels like a guarantee. They want clarity first because clarity removes risk. But that's not how life works. Action creates clarity. Repetition creates confidence. Structure creates momentum. And momentum is the thing you've been starving for. But you've been waiting for it like it's something that happens to you, instead of something you generate. So you start tightening your world. You start removing exits. You start building routines that don't ask you how you feel. And slowly, something changes inside you. The same silence that used to feel like abandonment starts feeling like space. The same loneliness that used to crush you starts feeling like freedom. Because you are no longer filling that empty space with desperation. You're filling it with work. You're filling it with progress. You're filling it with proof. You start walking differently. Your eyes change. Your posture changes. Your presence becomes heavier. Not because you're trying to look tough, but because you're no longer leaking your energy into people who don't return it. You start becoming the kind of man who doesn't need reassurance. And that is the moment you become dangerous. Because the world can feel when a man stops needing it. They come back when you stop reaching. That is not a fantasy. It's not a fairy tale. It's human nature, and it's ugly. People don't always return because they love you. They return because your absence interrupts their control. They return because your silence makes them curious. They return because they expected you to beg, expected you to break, expected you to stay emotionally available to the memory of them. They expected you to remain where they left you, like a man frozen in grief, like a man whose life paused the moment they walked away. They expected your world to shrink without them, and when it doesn't, when they feel that you're moving on, when they sense that you are no longer starving for their attention, something inside them twitches, their ego flares, their pride gets restless, because the version of you that needed them made them feel powerful. Your independence makes them feel replaceable, and people hate feeling replaceable. At first, they don't come back loudly, they come back carefully. A reaction on a post, a small message, a casual "how are you" that pretends nothing happened, a random memory, a joke, a soft attempt to reopen the door without admitting they slammed it. They test your temperature. They want to see if the old version of you is still alive. They want to see if you will respond quickly, if you will show emotion, if you will pour your heart out, if you will offer them access again. They want to see if they can still pull your strings, because even people who don't love you still miss being needed. They miss the attention you gave. They miss the comfort of knowing they mattered enough to affect your mood, and your silence makes them insecure. This is where most men fail. The moment they get a message, their chest lightens, their mind floods with hope, and they start negotiating away their standards. They forget the nights they cried. They forget the humiliation of waiting. They forget how many times they showed up for people who never showed up for them. They forget the feeling of being treated like an option. And they rush back because relief is addictive. Relief feels like oxygen after being underwater. But relief is not the same as respect. Relief is not the same as loyalty. Relief is simply the nervous system calming down because the craving was fed. And if you run back to relief, you will rebuild the same cage you finally escaped from. But you are not that man anymore, not because you became heartless, but because you became disciplined. Discipline changes your response. Discipline teaches you to pause. Discipline teaches you to read reality, not emotion. Discipline teaches you to recognize patterns, not words. And you start seeing things clearly. You start seeing that people don't return when they suddenly become loyal. They return when they sense you've stopped waiting. They return when your silence becomes heavy enough to haunt them. And the moment you understand that, you stop being flattered by their attention. You stop being impressed by their presence. You stop treating their return as validation. Because you've already validated yourself through the work. They come back and they expect the old access. They expect the quick replies. They expect the emotional availability. They expect the explanation. They expect you to confess how much it hurt. They expect you to show them that they still matter. But instead, you meet them with calm, not drama, not anger. Calm. A calm that comes from self-respect. A calm that comes from knowing your life doesn't depend on them anymore. And that calm terrifies them more than any argument ever could. Because arguments still show attachment. Arguments still show emotion. Calm shows freedom. Calm shows you've healed enough to not need to fight for recognition. Calm shows you've moved on. And you won't even need to say much, because your new energy will speak. Your discipline will speak. The way you carry yourself will speak. The fact that you don't chase will speak. The fact that you don't explain will speak. The fact that you don't crumble at their return will speak. And the moment they realize they can't control you the way they used to, they feel the weight of what they lost. Not always love, but access, influence, power over you. That's why they circle, that's why they test, that's why they return, and that's why they leave again when they realize you're no longer a man who can be easily pulled back into the same old cycle. This is the lesson discipline teaches you. Discipline isn't just about waking up early and working out. Discipline is about protecting your future from your own weakness, protecting your peace from your own cravings, protecting your standards from your own loneliness, protecting your identity from the part of you that still wants comfort at any cost. Discipline is what keeps you from becoming the same man again, just because someone returned with a few words and a familiar memory. So when they come back, you don't run, you don't beg, you don't fold. You watch, you measure, you see if they bring respect or just curiosity. You see if they bring accountability or just nostalgia. You see if they want to rebuild something real or just reopen an old door for selfish reasons. And if they don't meet the standard, you don't argue, you don't plead, you don't perform. You continue building, you continue training, you continue walking forward. Because the strongest form of revenge isn't proving them wrong with words. It's becoming so solid without them that they can't even recognize the man you've become. And that is what alone but stronger really means. There comes a point where you stop calling it a phase. You stop calling it a rough patch. You stop calling it a bad season, a temporary storm, a setback you laugh about later. Because you finally see it for what it is. This is your life. This is the reality you built, the reality you tolerated, the reality you repeated until it became normal. And that realization does something to you. It doesn't just hurt, it sharpens. It makes the world feel quieter and heavier, like the air itself is waiting to see what you do next. Because this is the moment where you either become the man you keep talking about, or you accept that you never will. No more stories, no more excuses, no more soon. This is the line. And the oath begins with honesty, not the cute kind of honesty that sounds good on social media, the kind of honesty that makes your stomach drop because it forces you to look at your own failures without blaming anybody else. You admit what you avoided, you admit what you fed, you admit the way you let comfort steal years from you while you pretended you were resting. You admit how many times you betrayed yourself in small ways and then acted surprised that your confidence never lasted. You admit that you kept waiting for a different version of you to arrive and rescue you, and that version never came because you never built him. You were waiting for a man that only exists on the other side of discipline, and you have been standing outside that door for too long. So you take responsibility, fully, not because it's fair, because it's yours. Responsibility is not an award, it's a weight. And the moment you pick it up, your life changes. Not because your problems disappear, but because the power returns to you. As long as you believed something else was coming, you could stay weak. As long as you believed life would change on its own, you didn't have to change. As long as you believed your mood needed to be right, you could keep postponing. But now you're done with waiting. You're done with postponing. You're done with being the man who talks himself into softness and then wonders why he feels trapped. You accept the brutal truth. The world doesn't owe you saving. And once you accept that, you stop asking for it. This is the final oath. Not spoken for applause, not spoken for anyone else. Spoken to the only person who matters in this fight. You. The one who hears every lie. The one who feels every delay. The one who knows exactly what you've avoided. The oath is simple. You will not live like a spectator anymore. You will not sit in the dark and negotiate your future away one day at a time. You will not trade your potential for comfort and then cry about the outcome. You will not pretend your life is happening to you when it is being shaped by you, because you've seen where that road leads. You've seen the quiet rot. You've seen the slow fading of a man who still functions but no longer respects himself. You've felt the numbness. You've tasted the bitterness that comes from knowing you could have been more and choosing less anyway. That ends tonight. You make the oath to stop begging for understanding. Understanding is fragile. It depends on people's attention spans, their empathy, their mood. It's not reliable. It's not a foundation. Results are a foundation. Discipline is a foundation. Strength is a foundation. And strength is built where nobody sees it. So you stop asking people to understand your struggle, and you start building something so undeniable that understanding becomes unnecessary. You stop talking about your pain, and you start converting it. Pain becomes fuel. Pain becomes discipline. Pain becomes the fire under your life. Not because it feels good, but because it's real, and reality is the only thing that can save you. You swear to yourself that you will not break your own promises anymore. No more unkept words. No more "I'll start" without starting. No more "I'm going to" without doing. Because every time you make a promise and don't keep it, you cut your own self-respect again. You bleed quietly, and then you act like it's just stress. It's not stress, it's self-betrayal, and you are done bleeding for nothing. If you say you'll wake up, you wake up. If you say you'll train, you train. If you say you'll work, you work. If you say you'll stop, you stop. Your words are no longer suggestions. Your words are law. Not because you're trying to be perfect, because you're trying to be trusted by yourself. And trust is the foundation of everything. You swear you will stop negotiating with weakness, because weakness is persuasive. Weakness is polite. Weakness never shows up like an enemy. It shows up like a friend. It shows up like you deserve this. It shows up like one more day won't matter. It shows up like you're tired and the world is unfair and you've been through enough. Weakness shows up like a reasonable argument, and the problem is you've been listening to it. You've been treating it like it has equal authority. It doesn't. It is a parasite. It wants your comfort, your attention, your time, your future. And from now on, when weakness speaks, you don't debate, you move. You swear to stop filling your loneliness with poison. You stop using distractions as medication. You stop numbing yourself with scrolling, with cheap pleasure, with anything that keeps you from feeling the weight of your life. Because numbness is not rest. Numbness is just a pause button that lets your problems grow while you pretend you're recovering. Rest is deliberate. Rest is controlled. Rest has a purpose and a boundary. Escape is endless. Escape always wants more. Escape always says just a little longer, until a little longer becomes your entire life. That ends now. You rest like a man. You recover like a man. You enjoy like a man, but you do not disappear from your own life. You swear to become disciplined even when your emotions are ugly, because that's the real test. Anyone can be disciplined when they feel proud. Anyone can be disciplined when the consequences are fresh and fear is loud. The real test is calm days. The real test is days where you feel average and nothing is pushing you. Days where the comfort is easy and the work is boring and nobody will ever know what you chose. Those days are the ones that build you. Those days are the ones that decide your identity, and you decide right now that your identity will not be built on convenience anymore. It will be built on repetition, on standards, on consistency, on the kind of effort that feels small until it stacks high enough to become a different life. You swear to stop seeking approval from people who don't live your life. Because approval is a leash. It keeps you performing. It keeps you begging. It keeps you living in reaction. The man you're becoming does not live in reaction. He lives in purpose. He doesn't need the crowd. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't need people to clap. He doesn't even need people to understand him. He needs results. He needs structure. He needs to carry weight without complaining. He needs to be useful, because the world respects men who are useful. It listens to them. It relies on them. It pays them. And even if nobody else ever sees it, he respects himself. That is the core of masculinity. Not aggression. Not performance, responsibility without begging for mercy. You swear to accept the cost, because this will cost you. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you friends who can't recognize the new you. It will cost you habits you used to hide in. It will cost you nights where you want to collapse and you stand anyway. It will cost you days where your body feels heavy and you move anyway. It will cost you the illusion that you can drift now and sprint later. Because drifting builds chains. Drifting teaches your body to accept softness. Drifting teaches your mind to tolerate mediocrity. And you are done with tolerable misery. You are done with the middle zone where your life isn't painful enough to force change and not fulfilling enough to justify staying still. You choose a harder life now so you don't inherit a harder life later. And maybe that sounds harsh. Maybe it sounds like war. It is war. But it's a war you've been in already. You've just been losing it quietly. You've been losing it one small choice at a time. You've been losing it every time you chose comfort over effort. Every time you chose distraction over discipline. Every time you chose easy now and then acted surprised that life became heavy later. So don't romanticize the peace you think you want. Peace is earned. Peace is built. Peace is not the absence of discomfort. Peace is the ability to carry discomfort without collapsing. That is what you're building now. Not comfort, not numbness. Strength. You swear to walk alone if you have to, because you finally understand that greatness is lonely. Not because you're special, but because most people won't pay the price. Most people want the results, but they don't want the repetition. They want the respect, but they don't want the boring work. They want the identity, but they don't want the discipline that creates it. So they stay the same. They drift, they talk, they complain, they consume, and then they fade. are not here to fade. You are here to become. Even if it's quiet, even if nobody notices, even if the only witness is the mirror and the part of you that knows the truth. So you make the oath. You stop negotiating. You stop waiting. You stop hoping in its laziest form. You start building. You start stacking evidence. You start doing the work you keep saying you want to do, and you do it whether you feel like it or not, because you don't want to be saved. You want to be free, and freedom doesn't come from someone else's love. It comes from your ability to control yourself. It comes from your ability to keep your word. It comes from your refusal to betray your future for temporary relief. That is freedom. That is discipline. That is power. And if nobody comes, good. Let it be that way. Let the room be quiet. Let the world be busy. Let the messages stay empty. Let the doors stay closed. Because you're not waiting anymore. You don't need permission. You don't need witnesses. You don't need sympathy. You need action. You need repetition. You need standards. You need to become the kind of man who moves in silence and still builds a life worth living. This is the final oath. You will not fade. You will not rot. You will not die quietly in comfort. You will not become the older version of you who talks about what he used to want. You will not let time erase you while you tell yourself you're healing. You will build. You will grind. You will suffer with purpose. You will carry the weight and become stronger under it. And when the world finally looks your way, you won't have to explain anything, because your life will speak, and the only thing it will say is this: you survived, you became, you earned your self-respect, and you did it alone.